Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very special show as lots of events are quickly taking place in Ukraine. And following our live coverage, let me welcome the panel of guests and journalists who will join us during this 26th show to delve into the Ukrainian-Russian escalated tensions. We will receive Dr. Azadin Abdelmoula, who is research manager from Al Jazeera Center for Studies from Qatar, in addition to Dr. Melili Amina, senior lecturer at University of Gelma, in addition to Ihab Abbas, expert of American affairs from the USA, in addition to in-studio guests, including Hussam Birkan and Azadin Didan. But before this, let us follow this special report about the beginning of the military operations and Russia's implicit threat to use nuclear weapons, as prepared by Nabil Khazini.
Yesterday morning, Ukrainians woke up with this sound. The siren, which indicated something serious was happening in the country. This footage shows the Russian army entering neighboring Ukraine. Following that, the Russian President Vladimir Putin gave a speech where he declared his country started a military operation in Ukraine.
I decided to conduct special military operation. It aims to protect people who have been bullied and subjected to genocide by Kiev regime for 8 years.
Army on the ground, helicopters on the Ukrainian sky, a scene which of course would threaten a head of state who has to face a superpower with unnoticeable help on field up to now. Volodymyr Zelensky addressed his nation.
Today, I ask the 27 leaders of Europe whether Ukraine will be in NATO. I ask directly. Everyone is afraid. They don't want to answer.
Several explosions were heard. The strikes quickly spread across central and eastern Ukraine. Most of the targets were military bases, but there were also substantial damage in and around several cities. 137 civilians and military personnel had been killed in the country on the first day. 316 people had been injured. While the roads in the Ukrainian cities were overcrowded with a stream of cars as thousands of people started leaving their country, and as many as 100,000 are internally displaced after fleeing their homes, and the biggest fear of war in Europe since World War II.
And to talk more about this, I'm joined live by Azadin Abdelmoula, research manager at Al Jazeera Center for Studies, live from Qatar. Well, thank you so much, Abdelaziz, for joining us. And as we have followed in our report, it says it was the beginning, but maybe we are not likely to see an end anytime soon, as the world has woken up today on more shelling, blood here and there, recording casualties from both sides, Russia or Ukraine. What do you think, Azadin? Apparently, we cannot hear our guest. We will try to check this little technical issue again in order to discuss more about this issue. I am joined by Azadin Abdelmoula again. I have asked you about, yes? Have you heard my question, sir?
I would say that no one at this point knows exactly when this will end or how it will end, as President Putin himself is insisting on, he will decide on the end of this operation according to the course of actions and to other parties' behaviors as well. So it might take a few days if the operation achieves its goals in toppling Kiev's regime, or it could alternatively take maybe weeks and even months or years if this doesn't happen soon.
Let's move together, Azadeen, to follow this report by Usama Ayadi, in which US President Joe Biden announced severe new sanctions against Russia on February the 24th in response to its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The new US sanctions will hit Russia's bank, cutting it from US financial system, adding that other new sanctions will hit Russian oligarchs and its technology sector. And then come back for more discussion.
President Joe Biden on Thursday unveiled harsh new sanctions on Russia, meant to punish the country for its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, calling out Russian President Vladimir Putin for his aggression, even as he acknowledged it would take time for the new measures to alter Putin's behavior. The new sanctions include export blocks on technology, a centerpiece of Biden's approach that he said would severely limit Russia's ability to advance its military and aerospace sector. He also applied sanctions on Russian banks and corrupt billionaires and their families who are close to the Kremlin.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time. We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and our allies.
Biden said the sanctions were designed to have a long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact to the United States and its allies. And he said Washington was prepared to do more. The new sanctions targets are not limited to Russia. The U.S. also went after individuals in Belarus, including the country's defense minister, for the country's role in facilitating the Russian attack.
As I made crystal clear, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power.
Biden announced a new deployment of ground and air forces to NATO's eastern flank, even as he reiterated U.S. troops would not engage in direct conflict in Ukraine. Biden insisted his threat to directly sanction Putin remains on the table and is not a bluff, but he didn't answer when asked why he hasn't directly sanctioned the Russian president yet.
Russia dearly.
And before I get back to you, Azadeen, for more discussion, I've spoken earlier to Ihab Abbas, expert of American affairs, and he had this to say when I asked him about President Putin has set a number of severe sanctions on Russia that do not include energy sector, but he has assured that he won't get into a war with Russia. And I asked him as well, how can we understand from this that Putin is washing his hands from Ukraine's hands, not planning to have his army or his country budget getting involved in a war? Let's have a listen.
President Biden, almost through the last 3 months, he just indicated several times that United States will not send boots on the ground. It means no military operations inside Ukraine to fight face-to-face with the Russian military. And this stance from the United States presidents will not be changed for a long time, because the United States right now trying to rebuild itself from inside. This is why we saw this withdrawal from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Syria, and the American administration right now trying to build itself to face and to encounter China, especially China, that has a beginning, that has a most powerful economy that could challenge the United States economy, plus the military size of Chinese military operations and the kind of equipment that they have, the advanced ones. It says that they will be a challenging contender to the United States military also. So this is why President Biden, he won't send the U.S. military outside the states, because he knows this will be in the cost of the advanced technology that the U.S. have right now, and this will cost the American taxpayers a lot of money to back up the military operations in Ukraine. So this is why They want to go to a fight which is not their fight.
Back to you, Azadeen. On the other side, amid all of these tensions, Putin is still saying he's open for talks in accordance to the UN Convention. Isn't it a bit contradictory to what is happening on the ground, according to you?
It is indeed, Nadia. It is contradictory. First of all, if we just go back a few days ago before the operation started and we compare the narrative with facts on the ground, there was great contradiction because Mr. Putin had insisted until the last minute that there was no invasion to Ukraine, there was no occupation of Ukraine, there were no troops going into Ukraine, but just a few hours we have seen that there is an operation going into the heart of Ukraine, and now talks are about few kilometers around or at the outskirts of the capital, Kiev. So yes, there is a contradiction, but we have to understand first what or how Russia thinks about what is going on now, because to my understanding, what is happening now is a continuity of the world, the Cold War, which has ended with unsolved problems. In the 90s, when the Cold War was declared to have ended, there were few issues that have not been solved, and what we are seeing now is just resuming that Cold War in different forms. So if you want me to go in more details, I would
yes, please. Yes, please, go ahead.
Between the two narratives, the Western and the Russian, yes.
Yes, please go ahead for further details. This is actually the purpose. Yeah.
Yes, because there is a contradiction between the Western understanding and narrative about the end of the Cold War and that of Russia. The Western understands that the end of the Cold War means that Russia was defeated and that the West has the right to expand into Eastern Europe as much as they have the capability to do so, and that Ukraine is an independent country. It has the full right to join or not whatever military alliance they wish to. Russia, on the other hand, thinks that, Russia or the Soviet Union was dissolved, but Russia is still the second biggest military power in the world. It has the full right to protect its sphere of influence. It's near countries like the Belarus, where it has actually done the last or the latest exercise inside. And they also think that Ukraine has no right to join the NATO and has no right to be part of the Western alliance because it is a threat to its national security and to its stability. So these contradictions, the two narratives, I think this is what brought events to this level of tension.
We might all agree here, Azadeen, that things are moving on a quick pace on the Ukrainian soil and still no real reactions to stop the Russian military operation, as Putin is actually putting it. Is the West waiting for all the Ukrainian territories to fall so they would react in this case?
Well, the West has said from the beginning that he's not going to commit forces on the ground on the side of Ukraine. Ukraine, we know, is not part of the NATO, and NATO has rules. The fifth point of their rules states that only if one member state is attacked, the others have to defend it and to join, but Ukraine is not a member state. They, of course, apply to join with other countries, but it has not joined yet. So NATO and the West cannot deploy troops inside Ukraine, and they said that clearly before we got to this point. But what they said and what they committed to is to impose economic sanctions and to assist Ukraine technically and with armament, and which is that's what it's doing right now.
So here you think probably, Azadeen, that the United States is no more beholden the title of the protector of the world?
Well, I don't know if the U.S. claim that it is protector of the world. Well, they say we are protector of the peace, if you want to say, global peace, and they see that what Putin did is a threat to the global peace and to the European peace. That's why they are trying to intervene, but not, as I said, on the ground, but intervene with different means. You know that all European countries and the States and Canada have already declared sanctions on Russia. They try to cut the Russian financial system from the global financial system. They try to block financial operation from Russian elites and Russian individuals close to Putin from using their monies inside Europe and America, and that's a lot of money, by the way, trillion, as America declared yesterday. I think it goes up to $1 trillion, the assets that they can block for Russians inside the West. But we don't, that does not stop this military operation immediately, and it's not going to stop it in the next few weeks because as we know, there's no troops inside, there's no Western troops inside Ukraine, and Ukraine is fighting. But if we look at the balance of power between the two countries, it's incomparable. So Putin can topple the regime in a few hours or a few days, and the West will not intervene, and sanctions will not have effect until maybe a couple of years or even after. So I think the West is waiting for this operation to long last than Putin thinks, and then the sanctions will start to have effects on the Russian economy.
Azadine, for more world reactions, let me just share with you this piece of information here regarding the European Union before I bring into our discussion Dr. Malili, who is going to join us in a bit. European leaders met into the early hours of Friday morning to reach an agreement on fresh sanctions aimed at hurting the Russian economy and putting President Vladimir Putin under enormous strain as his forces marched into Ukraine in reaction to Mr. Putin's acknowledgement of separatist territories in Ukraine. To the bloc's 27 members were able to impose a first set of penalties on Wednesday, and they did it in a record time. Let me just bring into our conversation here Dr. Malili, senior lecturer in University of Gelma, who joins us live via Skype as well. Putin said that they have finished the first military operations as part of the protection of both the breakaway regions, including Donetsk and Lugansk. Is it a hint that we are likely to see a more de-escalation on the Ukrainian grounds, Amina?
Right. Thank you, Nadia, for having me. And back to your question. First of all, I mean, this is what we and the international community and the worldwide would hope to see and to hear, that this, hoping that the conflict would de-escalate. But legally, unfortunately, legally speaking, and the way or the process through which the President Putin or the Russia Federation recognized the two separate regions in Ukraine is somehow legally unjustified, i.e. it violates the international agreements, and that contradicts with the UN Charter and so on and so forth. But looking also at the narratives provided by the president of Ukraine immediately or in response to the Russian military attacks on Ukraine, that the Ukraine is ready, or he outspoke that the government is ready to declare or issue weapons to the Ukrainian citizens to fight and defend their country. So here it is too early to claim or to make a clear statement that the situation will de-escalate.
Cool. Thank you so much, Amina. Back to you, Azdin, before I wrap up probably with you in a bit. Sergei Lavrov, a bit earlier, in a speech that Washington said is using Ukraine as a tool to stop Russia. To stop Russia from what exactly?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't hear Dr. Amina's.
No, I was actually talking about the declaration of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who said this morning that Washington is trying to use Ukraine as a tool in order to stop Russia. To stop Russia from what exactly, Azadin?
To stop Russia from expanding, to stop Russia, well, we know that since the end of the Cold War, Russia, remained the enemy number one of the West. Even the USSR has dissolved, but Russia remained the number one enemy of the world and the number two largest military power. And the threat of the Western expanding into East Europe. Ukraine has a Russia-friendly regime in 2014, and the regime changed, and we had Zelensky and his group came into power, and they tried to join the West. They tried to be part of the Western power, and Russia is not happy with that and cannot allow that because this is part of its national interest and national security. And the West, on the other hand, does not want Russia to have the upper hand of decision on the world system, who can join whatever alliance and not. So this is the game. This is the game. It's power game. It's not about ideology anymore. It's not about anything else. It's whether the West continue expanding into East Europe and engulf Russia from east and from south, because as you know, since the Baltic states joined the NATO and the European Union, East Russia started to be joining the West borders exactly. And now if Ukraine joins NATO and the European Union, of course, that part of southern Russia also will be Western. But what Putin has done so far is he ended technically, and he stopped Ukraine technically from joining the NATO, because in fact the NATO states that whatever country that has border problems or disputes cannot join. So technically Ukraine will not be part of NATO if the states of affairs remains as they are now. So what Putin was demanding the West in terms of guarantees, security guarantees, has already achieved them now on the ground.
Azadin, let's move on in order to see more world reactions. And here, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin echoed the recent call between Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, reiterating that China understands Russia's legitimate security concerns regarding Ukraine. Beijing residents share their opinion on the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine and call for dialogue to solve the problem. Let's have a listen.
The sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries must be respected and defended. The purposes and principles of the UN Charter must also be defended jointly. This is a principle that China has always upheld and a basic norm governing international relations that all countries should adhere to. At the same time, we also see a complex and unique historical context behind the Ukraine issue, and we understand Russia's legitimate concerns on security issues. China maintains that the Cold War mentality should be completely abandoned, and a balanced, effective and sustainable European security mechanism should ultimately be formed through dialogue and negotiation.
Well, back to you, Azadin. This is actually the stance of China. What do you think regarding this?
That's very understandable, because China tries to be balanced in its stance with regard to this crisis. They understand Russian interest, and they also stands with the UN Charter of defending the rights of every country to its independence and to its foreign relations. I don't expect China to say more than that, because they cannot commit with Russia to the end. They cannot go further with Russian intervention, because even though China has problem with the West and with the United States in particular, and their wars and trade wars and all this, but they are still very much interconnected with the world economy and the sanctions imposed on Russia. If China tries to avoid them or tries to help Russia breaching these sanctions, I don't think that will be in the interest of China. So that is what Russia or what China can say at the moment, is to understand the worries of Russia, and at the same time is to keep the position with the UN Charter of defending the independence of countries.
Thank you so much, Azadeen Abdelmoula, Research Manager at Al Jazeera Center for Studies. You joined us live from Qatar. Thank you so much for bringing all of these insights in our show. And now it's time for quick news regarding the updates that are taking place. World leaders have condemned the invasion and promised to retaliate with increased sanctions, as they considered the Russian invasion as an aggression and a threat to the peace of the European continent. And here we are going to move more to talk about Russian military launches land, air and sea invasion of multiple cities across Ukraine, as Ukrainian Foreign Ministry says Kiev is under bombardment from Russian rockets, and attacks on Kiev with cruise and ballistic missiles had resumed, and that he have heard 2 powerful explosions.
No, there are no NATO combat troops, no troops, NATO troops at all inside Ukraine. We have made it clear that we don't have any plans and intention of deploying NATO troops to Ukraine. What we have made clear is that we have already increased, and we are increasing, the presence of NATO troops in the eastern part of the alliance on NATO territory.
We're sincerely sorry that 2 countries which we consider to be friends, Russia and Ukraine, and with which we have close political, economic and social relations, are clashing in this way.
With new financial measures, we're taking new powers to target Russian finance, in addition to the banks we've already sanctioned this week. Today, in concert with the United States, we are imposing a full asset freeze on VTB.
After the military operation led by Russians, the international community reacted to the Russian move and is urged Moscow to withdraw and consider negotiations. Miriam Zian has more insights.
In many countries, thousands of protesters took the streets to rally against the Russian military operation. Thousands of people demonstrated in Moscow and St. Petersburg against the incursion launched on Thursday by Vladimir Putin, which resulted in more than 1,700 arrests in several Russian cities.
What happened today is a shame. Many of us have relatives and friends in Ukraine, and it is a betrayal to them.
In the United States, about 200 demonstrators, mostly Ukrainians, gathered in Times Square and marched in the streets of New York against the Russian special military operation in their native country.
I expect the international community to step in and help Ukraine. It's very important that we receive all the help that is needed, not only sanctions, but all the help that the international community can give us at this moment. It's very important, the reaction. Everybody should be reacting right now.
In Paris, nearly 3,000 demonstrators carrying blue and yellow flags or flowers in hand were gathered on Thursday evening in Place de la République, whereas hundreds of people had already gathered earlier in front of the Russian embassy in Paris, as well as in other major French cities. In London, a few hundred demonstrators, mostly Ukrainians, gathered outside the offices of Prime Minister Boris Johnson in Downing Street. And in Chile, dozens of demonstrators gathered in San Diego in solidarity with Ukraine.
Scary when you feel that you can't really do anything, you know. We are trying to do something, our part here.
After Russia launched a military operation, thousands of people from Russia to Paris, to London and the US rallied in support of Ukraine.
And on the other side, I have spoken earlier to Algerian Russian national Salah about the protests that took place in Russia and to describe how life is there. And he had this to say.
First of all, I would say thank you and hi to all the audience of your channel, and would thank you for this chance that you gave me to express my opinion and share with you what is happening actually in Russia and Ukraine. Well, as an Algerian and Russian national living in Russia, I would say that everything is okay for the moment. There is no harm or threat on my life. The conflict is a bit far from where I live. Well, war will always be war, let's be honest. And war is always bad. You never know what would happen, what would go wrong, or maybe how circumstances will change. Life is absolutely normal here in Russia. The situation is stable. However, some of the guys yesterday were protesting in St. Petersburg and Moscow. They were protesting against both countries, and they were calling both countries to stop war and sit to talk and negotiate. To be honest, Ukrainian, that's my opinion, Ukrainian new policy and politicians are the ones to blame. Also, we have to blame the US and the NATO. Back in 2014, after the Ukrainian Revolution, the new president then, Poroshenko, and the same what's happening now in Ukraine with Zelensky, they started oppressing and attacking the Russian-speaking community there. They prohibited the Russian language in schools, and they were oppressing Russian citizens and Russian-speaking community living in Donbass and Crimea. We all remember what was happening in Crimea, and as a result, Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, sent his troops over there and defended his citizens and the Russian-speaking community. Well, on the ground, there is no change. There is no change at all here in Russia. We still don't feel anything. Ruble, which is the Russian currency, is has known ups and downs. The dollar too. To be honest, sanctions don't touch citizens and haven't changed anything. I mean, haven't changed much. Russia is stable. Russia is a country that exports more than imports. So everything is okay for the moment, and hope that war stops. But I hope also that European countries and the US stop their propaganda against Russia and stop backing and making conflicts about Russians and Ukrainians. And I hope that peace will be set in days, like in the future.
And economically speaking, waves of dread in the States due to the remarkable rising and accumulation of problem of the world's greatest economies with record and unparalleled inflation rates for 4 decades. Sofiane Kinturi reports.
On the other side of the Atlantic, the fragments of the war which broke out on the line of contact between Russia and the West arrived quickly. And inside the United States, concerns about the high prices of energy charges preceded the news of ground developments of Russian military operation in Ukraine.
the problem with the Ukraine will affect not only America, it will affect all Europe, because the gas price is going to go higher. When everything go higher, it's going to affect the life standard. It's going to be high inflation. And there's going to be, especially the cab driver will be affected more than anybody, because that's what we do for a living.
Abdullah, cab driver outside Washington's major railway station, isn't the only one concerned about green fuel prices. His colleague Abbas admits the spike that comes 2 weeks before the war in Eastern Europe.
It already started increasing. A regular gas 2 weeks ago, I paid $3.25. $3.25. Today it's $3.66. And
Intercept County, tens of truckers will park in the rest area with big fears of the economic changes caused by the Russian military operation on Ukraine. Many truck drivers blamed US government for reaching such an economic crisis.
I don't, as far as the tactics of Ukraine and fuel going up and all that stuff, I don't know as to why the price has to go up. We're supposed to have all this abundance of fuel over here in America. We're supposed to be self-sufficient, so I don't know why the prices go up. I don't know. But as far as us as
The repercussions of the Ukrainian war touched the American economy and caused waves of fears in the States by unusual increasing and the accumulation of the troubles of the largest economies in the world, with a record and unprecedented inflation rates for 4 decades.
And to talk more about the economic repercussions, I'm joined here in our studios by Azzeddine Didan, Economic Department Head-in-Chief. Thank you so much, Azzeddine, for joining us. In the beginning, I'm going to ask you, despite economic sanctions, threats from top world leaders, do you think that this would hit the Russian economy?
Good evening first, and good evening, dear viewers. The evaluations of the repercussions of the West sanctions, at least on the first bunch that was proposed in the last few days, on the economic Russian, it can be divided into 3 levels. The first one, depending on the kinds of sanctions that was imposed on Russia. Everyone can agree that these sanctions was not as strong as the West was expecting when they said that the West were not really firm against Russia regarding the sanctions. And this is what we witnessed, and it was quite obvious and concrete in the sanctions imposed by Russia in Europe. Up until now, no country, no European country, nor American or British, did not exclude Russia from the complete exclusion from the global financial system. As for the second level, is linked on the strategy that Russia has taken since 2014. Everyone can recall that Russia, when they annexed Crimea, they were sanctioned, and perhaps the sanctions were more severe. The Russian economy had a loss of $50 billion. Russia has learned the lesson, and they managed to diversify its portfolio of having sovereign bonds denominated outside the dollar, such as yen, euro, and yuan. These sovereign bonds were not limited to dollars. This is on the one hand. As for the second part, seeing the economic nature or type of Russia, which is strong, these sanctions are not really
so much, Azzeddine Didan, for all of these insights. Now I move to our second guest and special journalist, Hussam Berkan, PhD researcher in international relations. As a summary to all of this, what's happening, what we have brought in our show, what is Russia is seeking in this case, despite the fact that President Vladimir Putin said they had no intention to launch a war.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for having me. So actually, I want to emphasize on a very important point, or let me say a strategy used by Russia, which is known as maskirovka. Maskirovka is a strategy used by Russia in order to deceive the enemy. It's a military strategy used by Russia, and it's known since the USSR period. As we witnessed, since the beginning of the rising of tensions, Russia has been amassing tens of thousands of soldiers, but whenever the West asks Russia what is going on, the answer is always denial. They deny the fact that they are going to invade Ukraine. They say it's just a military training, but in reality, they were just preparing themselves for a military invasion. So maskirovka is the strategy they have been using since the Cold War, and basically, in Russian, it means disguise. And as I've just explained, it's a way to deceive the enemy. It's a way of manipulation, a way of diplomatic, political manipulation of the other. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hussam Berkan. And now we wrap up our live coverage by how world press has highlighted their newspapers right after the escalated tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Let's follow.
Events on the line of the Russian operation in Ukraine have topped the front pages around the world since dawn on Thursday, and the Russian president's photo topped many newspapers. The Lebanese newspaper Al Akhbar chose this picture on its front page, through which Putin appears to be warning, and chose a headline for it, "Enough or you're gone" in Russian. A picture of a woman with her head covered in blood topped many newspapers, such as The Guardian newspaper under the headline "Putin invades," which seems to become a symbol of the conflict, as it also made the front page in The Sun. Le Figaro newspaper chose to name the military operation "War in Europe," a name that spread through most European newspapers. Al Arabiya Al Jadid newspaper described the operation the largest war in Europe since 1945, and wrote that the Russian President Vladimir Putin had carried out threats to invade Ukraine, taking advantage of the impotence that hampers the North Atlantic Alliance, America and Europe, and the absence of any Western decision on Russian lands to confront it. Al-Quds Al-Arabi of London, for its part, published this cartoon by Osama Hajjaj under the title "Putin's Road to Peace," while the Washington Post carried an opinion article in which it said that Ukraine is paying the price today for forgetting the lessons and history of Georgia.
That's it for today. For further insights, please do stay tuned on Al 24 News. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.